Thank you, Barry, and good morning, everyone. So PR Week, as the leading global editorial brand covering the PR sector for the last 30 years or so, has always seen its role as a critical friend to the PR industry. We see it as our role to professionalize the PR industry across the world. And indeed, after the Barcelona Principles were created in 2010, PR Week banned AVEs from its title forever. So since then, PR Week has refused to accept advertising value equivalents as measurement criteria for any of our awards or any of our case studies. Indeed, we do all we can to encourage the measurement of outcomes rather than outputs in this great industry. On a personal note, I wrote a book called Campaigns That Shook the World a couple of years ago, which is an analysis of 10 of the greatest campaigns, greatest communications campaigns that have been run over the past 40 years. And when identifying great campaigns, of course, one of my main criteria was, did they work? Did they exceed their ambitions? What were their ambitions? And what did they really change? And I think this is where measurement becomes so critical. It is the acid test of communications. So this session is going to look at what progress has really been made in the measurement and evaluation business over the past 10 years and into the future. Where do we stand now? And what is a realistic achievement within the next 10 years for the sector? And to help answer our questions, we have a stellar panel today. We have a mixture of very powerful clients and specialist CEOs in the research and evaluation sector. We have some Americans, an Australian, a Spaniard, and more of us annoying Brits. So it's something approaching a G7 of the communications business, I think. Well, it's a G4 anyway. So we're going to start the session with Dr. David Rockland, who's going to take us through some new research on where we stand. David.
Great. Thanks, Danny. Great. You know, this is amazing to me, Barry. To Alex's point of calling Barry and myself and Richard old bags this morning, I spoke at the very first one of these summits in Berlin in 2009. And Barry, I don't remember a room remotely this size and this many people in this many countries. So maybe as a precursor to this talk, which is where have we been and where are we going, we've come quite a distance, I think, from Berlin in 2009. And Alex, thank you for calling me an old bag. It's always good when you retire to then be called an old bag. Anyway, let's move ahead. What we did here is we did a quick survey of, let's call them industry leaders. First, the 5 organizations that really brought about the Barcelona Principles in 2010. So ECO with Francis Ingham somewhere in this room representing them. PRSA, Joe Cohen, its former chairman. Joe, thank you. Global Alliance, AMEC, IPR. So we surveyed the leaders of those organizations, and we also surveyed the AMEC board. And we asked them a few questions. First one, if we go back into the very old days, the days of the dinosaurs in this field, what's changed? You know, what was life like back then? And the answers look like this, that 10 years ago, we were a fairly unsophisticated field. We were somewhat of an afterthought, and that AVEs were the dominant conversation at that point in time. And I point out Tina McCorkindale from IPR's quote in particular, how many of you remember multipliers? That was a big deal 10 years ago. I don't think I've heard that word any time recently at all. And then we asked the question, and we said, okay, so that's the past. Now, what are we doing now? And when I first got this slide from our graphics group, I thought, why is this woman so scared of all these channels? And in particular, why is she so scared of this Twitter bird? And then I thought of my own president, Donald Trump, and his twittering, and I realized why we're all so scared. But nonetheless, we did ask the question, so where do we stand today? And today, you see a lot of the quotes here as really suggesting that in the last 10 years, there's been a big evolution. AVEs have either gone away or are near going away. This idea that you see at the bottom here, that we're focusing much more not only on big data, but on smart data and the application of the right data to the right circumstance, that we're focusing much more, as you've heard from the speakers this morning, on the measurement of outcomes and impact versus, as the woman from Adobe talked about, the measurement of input or activity levels. But even though we have a lot to be proud of, a lot of the quotes here also said, you know what, we got a ways to go. It's inconsistent, it's patchy. We're not, this journey that keeps being alluded to the whole time, we're not done on the journey, we're still on the road. So then we talk about, so where are we going next? If you looked at, in a crystal ball, what would you see coming down the road? And from our industry leaders, we had these answers. And particularly the idea of automation, attribution, in other words, how does communications link to and drive organizational effect or impact or performance? And then AI, artificial intelligence. It's been alluded to a number of times here so far. It's something that will continue to be discussed here. And I particularly would call your attention to Workshop A tomorrow morning, chaired by Mary Elizabeth Germain, actually my successor at Ketchum, as well as Allison Hoogley will be there, and Omar from UNICEF, and actually my little nephew will be a panelist. He runs a big tech company these days. And basically, they're going to talk about the future of AI and where this part of the industry is very much heading. So as we continue with our survey, we also looked at moments as sort of, what were the big deals? What really, as we look back over the last 10 years, what can we be proud of or not so proud of? Beginning with the, of course, AVEs. Barcelona Principles, 2010, just what Danny talked about a second ago. Barcelona Principles said no more AVEs. Are they dead? Not quite. They're basically kind of on life support. If 80% of companies were using them 10 years ago, I think, Richard, you used the number 20% is sort of where it's at, something like that. Basically, they're dying, but they are still somewhat around. And I really like Nicole Moreo's quote here as she responded to it. One of the trouble we've had in getting rid of AVEs is that what was cool about AVEs in a way is they were cheap and they were really easy to use. We don't have cheap and easy. When you start linking and trying to do attribution, maybe even through artificial intelligence, from what communicators do to an organizational effect, to your speech, keeping peace in the world, it ain't as simple as AVEs. And so we do have a ways to go, maybe not in simplifying it, but in certainly making those connections easier to see. Role of AMEC. Have we made a difference? Has the community assembled in this room really made a difference? And I think the answer is very, very clearly yes. Colin Wheeler points out a couple of the things this organization has done. They've been talked about already today. And it's neat to see that those accomplishments play out in the work of so many organizations. When Alex stands up here and talks about their model, and their model having in some ways be based on what this organization, AMEC, has created, yeah, I think we did some good over the last 10 years. And then certainly the Barcelona Principles. Did the Barcelona Principles change the world? No, they were kind of stating the obvious as the person who stood on stage in Barcelona and talked about them in 2010. But as Asim points out here, what they did do is give us a foundation from which to build. If you will, they set the structure of a building, and then since then we've really built off it. What's been frustrating? What's made us want to bang our heads on the table? And those frustrations, at least in terms of the respondents, really fall into these 4 areas. PR and communications still somewhat siloed from many other parts of organizations. AVEs have not died entirely. And probably the fact that maybe the hardest to change, which is up in the top right of this, is that in PR, there's kind of a cultural issue here. Every PR person, every PR practitioner will say, oh yeah, we gotta measure. It's really, really, really important. But don't measure me, because I'm kind of happy not being measured. You know, yeah, who needs measurement? But do it over there. So we still have a cultural shift almost to make in the PR profession to basically say, you know what, measurement isn't about proving what you did, but very much about how do you get better as you progress into the future. It's not a look backwards, it's really more of a look forward. Opportunities ahead, we did ask for the organizations, the 5 organizations that brought about the Barcelona Principles. Where do they see moving forward? They look like this. And a couple of things I think are very important here to call out to you. Certainly the concept of integration. We've heard that a lot. It's one of the I's here, of the 3 I's. But also that integration really extended to academia. I don't think we've done a good job yet. It's great to see Jim McNamara here. But the reality is the people who are teaching the future of our field need to be linked so much better, as Barry pointed out in the opening, through education to how does this field then play out in a career in communications or in marketing, et cetera. In terms of AMEC's top priorities among its board, basically new technology, continued focus on education, and certainly the AI, the artificial intelligence. That seems to be the next big wave coming. You'll hear more about it undoubtedly tomorrow and undoubtedly throughout this entire summit, but it's certainly an area for AMEC's continued leadership. So, we asked the question. And the question was, if you happen to be walking down a beach and you found a bottle and you rub the bottle and out pops a genie, and a genie says you got 3 wishes. Now, we're all kind of, you know, we'd all love to pretend we are the most philanthropic people in the world. But let's just say we used our first 2 wishes to be rich, famous, or maybe rich and good-looking or something like that. But we had 1 wish left, and we decided to apply it. So what do you want to be different or change in the measurement world? So here are some of the answers. And it occurred to me, in fact, I showed one of my colleagues here this particular slide. If you don't know who the person is in the middle, it's Barbara Eden from the show I Dream of Jeannie, which is a huge show in the United States. It may not play in all 40 countries, but that's what this particular graphic is about. And here's some of the things people are saying in terms of what do I wish that would come true. And the one I really sort of, to me, that stood out was Eileen Scheel of Cleveland Clinic, who many of you have seen on this stage before. And she said, you know what? Stop talking about the journey. Let's get over the journey. Let's finish the journey and be done. And so there's almost, and she's a very big client, and she's a very strong advocate for measurement, but there is a sense that we got to begin to move toward finishing the journey, and this is how you do it, as opposed to we're on a perpetual journey forever. Again, agree with her or not, that was the sentiment she expressed. Other things you see here have to do with education, better understanding, integration, no silos, more money. We go to the next set of slides, the comment in particular from Paul, from Cision, where he calls out, we got to start moving really from data to insight as a particular focus in this field as we move forward. So, I didn't ask this question, but when I looked at all the survey responses, there appeared to be a hero. A hero in terms of this path we've been on for the last 10 years. This individual keeps getting called out. Everybody's survey said it's because of him that we've made so much progress over the last 10 years. And of course, you might guess that's Barry. And here are a couple of the quotes about Barry. In terms of many of the quotes, it was about Barry's role, obviously, in bringing AMEC along. As the person who stood on the stage in Barcelona in 2010, I want to call on Ben's quote, because the Barcelona Principles were invented not by me who stood on the stage or all the people who contributed input. It was Barry's idea from day one. Doesn't get the credit, but Barry, you sure deserve it. And as we looked back in time, it's something that I think was probably your biggest or one of your biggest contributions to this field. In terms of a thank you to Barry, we did have a question because he was nice enough to fill in the answer. So Barry, what do you want to see in the future? And it really has to do with a greater commitment from clients, let's say more professionalism, more education, where education and certification is a critical aspect of working in this field. You can't do it unless you know how to do it. So that's a quick summary of where we've been, where perhaps we are, where we're going. I think as we look back over the last 10 years, there's a great deal to be proud of. If we look at this field, when this summit was first held in Berlin in 2009, this is a very different organization, not just because of the number of people in this room and the fancy lights and all this stuff. The whole field has changed. To Asim's point about professionalism, we've become a profession that probably didn't exist with that level of clarity back 10 years ago. So to perhaps have a toast, there's a toast I've always liked that's in a movie called Longest Day, Goodnight, I think it's called. Something like a Gina Davis movie, and there's a quote in there. She makes a toast and says, "May the best of our past be what's the worst of our future." And so a toast to all of us. We've had a great past. Let's have a great future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David, and exactly to time. I would expect a measurement conference to run to time, but we're going to carry on trying to do that. So what we're going to do now is each of our 4 leaders is going to come on stage and quickly talk for 5 minutes about where they think the world of evaluation has come to and where it's going. Starting, please, with Paloma.
Thank you so much. And I have no presentation. No, thank you so much, and thank you, Barry. I think it's an honor to be here in your big party, as I can see. So, first of all, is what evaluation means for an organization like UNICEF, that is the United Nations Funds for Children. It's an organization that usually, yes, we evaluate all the time, but we evaluate that every child is in a school and learning, every child is surviving and thriving, every child is protecting from violence. How to convince an organization that in order to get all kids in a school, all kids protected, it was an important step to be investing and to be putting a focus on evaluating on communications. And I wanted to say 10 years ago, no, 5 years ago, UNICEF considered communications as an operations function. We use it to report to our donors, we use it to inform of what we were doing, but it was not even part of our KPIs. It was not even part as evaluation system at a country level. We are present in 190 countries, and we were evaluating our immunization campaigns. We were evaluating how many kids were enrolled in a school, how many disabled kids were integrated in their societies, but we were not evaluating at all, and we were considering communication investment as an expenditure. And our donors, governments, but also individuals, were not expecting us to be spending $1, €1 on communications. But there was a moment that, of course, the world has changed. And the way we were delivering results in 20th century is not the same one as we are delivering results now. And we realized that as important as to be immunizing and buying 50% of the vaccines is to be advocating and changing policies and national budgets and national perceptions around the importance of immunization. And more, we tried to build a case within UNICEF that it was not just to be amazing on media and amazing on social media. It was to make sure that every post, every tweet, every headline had a what for. And it was to convince people that we shouldn't be reporting about how fantastic our programs are in Indonesia, in Uzbekistan, or in Uganda. We should be reporting what for we need to engage to win the support of decision makers, of the public, for the cause of children, and to guarantee that children's issues are at the spotlight, at the heart of the social and the political agenda. That was a very, very tough journey, because communications in UNICEF had flat budgets, flat resources for the past 10 years. And we had to prove the value of communication, but also the impact. We were measuring, as all of you, I imagine, our impact in media, our impact in social media, how many news at 9 were reporting about UNICEF. It was very tough for us to prove that we were communicating to advocate, that we were communicating to drive results. Only because we knew we had a big challenge and that we have to prove our case. We were very lucky 5 years ago to turn into AMEC, Rockland was the magician, and to say, listen, we have a big endeavor, we have to prove, while we don't have the resources, we have to prove, while we have the teams we have, how we are going to make sure that from minute one, this is a win-win. From the first campaigns, from the first big initiatives we are going to run, we need in real time to be showing to our organization, to our executive board, all your governments are in an executive board, that really the increase on the importance on communication, on public advocacy, on public engagement is critical. It's a new way to deliver results. And that's where we invented, because in the past strategic plan, 2014-2017, there was not a single line talking about communications. So we said, that's fantastic. If we are not there, we are all over it. We are mainstreamed. And then we decided to create the first ever global communication and public advocacy strategy for UNICEF with KPIs. And we had to convince country per country to be incorporating KPIs. We managed to get 107 countries to incorporate communication KPIs, and that was magic. Because thanks to those KPIs, thanks to the evaluation, thanks to have specific examples on how changing attitudes and beliefs around violence against children had changed legislation, how to be changing attitudes and beliefs around the discrimination against disabled kids in Eastern Europe has led to changing on the educational priorities. Thanks to start proving and evaluating that sort of impact, we manage in the current strategic plan, 2018-2021, not only to have more than 30 KPIs that 190 countries have to deliver, but even to be considered the third most important change strategy for the organization, and to have the winning the support of the public and the strengthening of our brand, and to gain the trust of the world, and the trust not only for UNICEF, but also for all the work around children as one of the key drivers for results in the new phase of the organization. So for us, and I imagine this is why you have invited us, evaluation in communication has proven to be the only way to be really putting into value the communication work that we do day to day, and that in this world, as we have learned from Nate and from others, how on earth are we going to be doing the work we have for children if we want just to work behind the doors without communicating and without speaking up about the most challenging issues of our time? Thank you.
And now to give us 5 minutes on the health of evaluation is a man who you need no introduction to, Alex Aitken.
That's very kind. I feel I've taken enough of the audience's time, but I will make one point, which is this. I fear that we don't have an evaluation deficit, notwithstanding anyone in the room who still uses AVEs. Does anyone still use AVEs? Ooh.
I'm going to admit it.
Notwithstanding that, but I do not believe we have an evaluation gap. We do have a leadership deficit, because it is the courage and conviction of people in this room to go from this conference to change things. Because as you've just heard from Paloma, and I commend the journey that Carmen and NATO are on, as you've heard about the Government Communications Service, and as David ably set out, if you go and use the knowledge and turn it into action and insight, and stand up and speak out and speak truth to power about what works and what doesn't work, then we will move forward our profession. But that takes real leadership. I don't believe in creativity in terms of communication or brainstorming. I believe in using hard science and application and iteration to come to the truth. And I'd remind all of you that the so-called eureka moment of Archimedes was not just a piece of brilliant insight, it was a process of studying and understanding and thinking, and then his subconscious brain came up with the solution. So I think it's leadership we need, Danny, from this conference to meet the challenge that Barry has set us and David has set out.
Thank you very much, Alex. So we're now going to have two more leaders who are going to give their quick 5-minute views on the health of the industry. Then we're going to open it up to questions, and then you get lunch. So can we please have Abe Smith, President of Cision? Abe.
Thank you. Thanks. Hey, everybody. Let's see. Try to push forward. Buenos, nice to see you. Danny, thank you. Barry, thank you. The first person I met when I came to London about 10 months ago to join Cision, a global leader in providing technology and services to this industry to help you accelerate as PR professionals. was warm and inviting, and it's great here. I'm going to give you my perspective as a technologist, 18 years in Silicon Valley, about 10 years here in Europe, and I'll tell you what I see. And I think the future starts today. So it's an exciting dialogue that we've already had, a lot more to come. If I look at the industry right now, and my perspective as an outsider coming in, but a MarTech professional, the truth is what we do as alchemists or magicians is a lot like reading tarot cards. So, today as practitioners, we get a directional view, a clear guidance, a sense, and it's important, it's valued, but it's still a little bit fuzzy. It's a little bit hazy. And with the help of Danny and PR Week at Cision, we commissioned a report about 6 or 7 months ago that spoke about this, and 75% of you said that, we need to be focused more on business outcomes, real attribution. Frankly, I don't know who the other 25% was who disagreed, but 75% said we had to get more precision. That's a topic we've heard already as business outcomes. And the truth is, we're seeing that happen. And my observations, which has been humbling, is that this evolution is turning into a revolution. And slowly but surely, the mavericks are taking effect. So when I think about mavericks, I think of customers that I've met, like Fergus Campbell out of the UK, who heads PR and communications for a company called Gumtree, an eBay company. And rather than talking about AVEs, as we've talked about, or other esoteric vanity metrics, Fergus speaks in the terminology of the 14 to 19 million unique visitors that come to the website and the impact on community and the impact on conversion. And that's the language that he reports back to his executives regarding ROI. That's a PR revolutionary in action. Now, in other metrics, I see, Paloma gave an incredible view on what she's doing at UNICEF. The truth is, I see this every day. What you do as a craft in PR is noble. What Anil does from the Stroke Association in the United Kingdom saves lives. And this guy measures his work daily on how many people know the acronym FAST, and I hope you do, because it's the acronym that shows if you're having a stroke. That's how he measures his PR outcome, and it's analytical. He is a PR revolutionary, and also, by the way, a prior AMEC award-winning professional. So the Holmes report a couple of years ago talked about this sort of gap and how we think about PR today and that rift of measurements and discussion around reach, impressions, audience, and so forth, which I think is still meaningful. And I think it's language that we want to use and recognize. But the truth is it's dated, and we certainly won't mention AVE. I prefer ABE. But the measurements that we talk about now is revenue growth, shopping cart conversions, lead conversions. That's the language of MarTech. That's the language that I hope you're speaking, and that's the language that we're seeing. And the truth is, the alchemy and the magic of tarot cards, I think, is turning into a magician's crystal ball. We heard the terminology a second ago, David, from you. That crystal ball is precise. That crystal ball is clear. And it's filled with data. And data is what drives and fuels those outcomes that we want to understand better. And we can take a page. Jennifer earlier from Adobe talked about digital marketing and how she measures her business. The truth is, we can take a page from paid and owned media. Because if you've experienced receiving an email, which I'm sure you have from a system like Adobe Campaign or Oracle, Eloqua, or otherwise, when you open that email, you're telling the marketer who you are, what you like, what you do, what you care about, and where you went to. It's tracked. Or if you're running a digital ad and you run digital ad campaigns on paid media, the truth is you're telling the marketer the same thing, who you are, what you like, what you spend, what you don't spend, where you go. That's the truth of the path. And the good news is we see that happening in earned media, and that's as a company providing the global leader in technology and services to accelerate the work that the PR professional does. We believe in that, and we believe that's going to is applying to earned media. So let's give you an example to take it from the esoteric to the real. Think about something like a brand like Nike, and think about the PR professional at Nike that's targeting Runner's World magazine. And today, getting that hit, that article that talks about the best sneaker, the best way to wear them, how to use their product is important. But the viewer is anonymous. So while we get the hit, the truth is we don't actually know what that hit translates to, but we can. And in fact, that anonymous individual reading the article can become clear, can become Paul Jones. And Paul Jones is a person that has real attributes: gender, sociographic, demographic, economic, firmographic, geographic, spend, location, information. It's all documented. In fact, it's happening now. It happens in digital, it happens in paid and owned, it's happening in earned. We're bringing that to bear. And we see that as a critical element because once we know who that person is, we also know where they went. When they read the article in Runner's World, Paul then goes to Nike.com. And at Nike.com, he clicks on a shopping cart and buys the sneakers. That's attribution. It's not an AVE, that's real outcome. And that connected association to business outcome, shopping cart buy, is actually what the CEO, the CMO, and the CFO wants to know. Now, we also believe philosophically at Cision that while science and technology is critical, it's a marriage of art and technology. People matter. And the truth is, you probably saw our acquisition of Prime Research. We believe in the fact that you still need the analysis to understand the details. And that analysis can come in a report that you've seen online or through a software technologies you've seen through images before, or it can come in a report that delivers real information about business users and it ties it to outcomes. That's what we do. In fact, we've launched the same technology we call Cision Impact or Cision ID. There's 500 customers in the US using it now. We're seeing that migrating globally into large brands. And whether you're a technology company that believes in the digital native approach, you're Google, you're Amazon, you're Snapchat, you're Spotify, all of who are customers that use our technology, the large enterprises that are slower sometimes to change are being the mavericks. So 9 out of the 10 most innovative companies, according to Forbes, actually embrace this approach. So we think it's happening. And in fact, the call to action that we'd ask today, as you hear this dialogue and you hear the charge, join the revolution. You know, be a PR revolutionary. It is going to take that kind of risk and maverick approach to see real change. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but most certainly not least, we've got John Kroll, who's the Managing Director and Chief Executive of Essentia.
Thank you. All right, thanks everyone. Good afternoon. For me, it's a great pleasure to be here because I've been on this journey as well with AMEC for this decade or more. So for me, 2006 was when Essentia started to look at how we're going to be really serious in the insights business. And probably the first step we took from being a media monitoring, media intelligence business to bring the insights in is we had to make an acquisition to bring in Professor Jim McNamara. So we made an acquisition to bring in the culture and the values and the insights of Jim into our business so we can really adapt. And the second part of what we did that year was bring in another business, and actually Carly Sakis joined us as well, the Chief Insights Officer at Essentia. So we were very, very fortunate in that 2006 period to set up this business around the insights and the values and the people we needed. So for me, that's been 10 years and we're still learning. And it's really, really important that this industry is changing so much that we have to keep learning about what is really important for our client. So I sort of took that back to the lessons learned over the last 10 years and I put it into a decade, and there's a small problem with that slide on. Oh no, it's okay. It's on the screen here. I think there's been a lot of progress in our industry and a lot of progress in the people in this industry. We've heard today around education, advocacy, the principles, all these things, but is it fast enough? And I think it's a real question as we move through these 2 days to really question ourselves, because the communications and ways happening for our clients is changing rapidly. Are we keeping up as an industry with those drivers for our clients? So I think it's really, really important. One constant over that whole period of time has been clean and relevant data delivered at speed. And the clean piece is around the accuracy of your methodology or the way that your analyst is looking at that information, relevant. And the question, I haven't put media, I've put data, because that's changed over the 10 years to be very much about what are the data sets coming in. I saw in the survey that there's some questions around budgets and pressure on budgets. But I think when you find that we become a strategic partner, they're using us in the planning, not just the evaluation, and they're starting to use the data sets and the different ways that we do it, there isn't a pressure on budgets. And there isn't a pressure on engagement because we become part of their planning process, we become part of the evaluation, and we become part of the learning. Sergi talked this morning about we're fortunate we are. We've had great conditions for over a decade about the market conditions of what we work with, more complexity for our clients, more information being communicated about brands, policies all the time. Our clients need assistance with that. So it's been a beautiful decade for us, and I think those conditions will happen. And I think what's quite interesting, when I first came to AMEC, it was very much around consultancies. We had specialists very much driven around the founder who had the knowledge to take to the client and be able to sit in there. Then you had companies like Accenture and such who have come into this space, and we wanted to put it into platforms and scale it. So we brought great people in, but we wanted to actually then become very sticky for our clients. We could see that media monitoring by itself wasn't going to be the piece that keeps that client with us. It's what are the KPIs, what's the evaluation, how can we help them with their strategic drivers? And now we're seeing technology coming into the play, people from outside the industry or what disruptors who are going to have a big role in that. So to me, the people aspect, the analysts, the role has specialized over the 10 years and it's going to continue in that way. So the measurement of communications is really stretching. It's having to move to business impact, and people have said that. It's moving to multimedia. So how do we get the right methodologies to look at a long-form piece of journalism against a short-form opinion and actually give a really good measurement for our clients that shows the impact, shows the influence, shows the business decisions they should be making. And we're seeing consolidation. We're seeing more and more clients wanting that global view. They don't want to have different methodologies and different ways of bringing this together. They need to see how their brand is being looked at on a global scale. So the next 10 years, I think it's going to be global and it's going to be competitive. But I still really think there's a place for the local player because that local knowledge about market information and actually understanding those market dynamics is important. But it's a scale business. Data of scale is going to be incredibly important. The platforms of scale are going to be important. That methodology for a global brand has to be consistent. It's going to be about integrated communications across that shared, earned, paid environments. People want to see what are the most effective communication pieces, where should they put their budgets, how do we help our people with that earned media environment. To me, that's the return on engagement, not a media analysis. I think if we talk about AVEs all the time, and I don't want to talk about them, but I think media analysis is going to be the other term that falls away because it has to be around the return of engagement or the impact, the business impact that you're having. And I'm a big believer in technology is going to play an enormous part in the next 10 years. This room sits on an amazing amount of data that's all been coded, all this quality data, and that's what AI engines need. I think there's this misnomer about what AI is. AI is just trying to replicate very consistent outcomes, and we've got the data in this room. It's like the black oil, as we were talking about over dinner last night, that we have the capacity to use that because we've already got thousands, millions of pieces of data that have already been coded and have the quality to it. So I see a very bright future over the next 10 years. Thanks very much.
Okay, so now there's an opportunity for you guys to have your say or ask any questions of our illustrious panel. I should also say that we're joined, obviously, by Richard Bagnall, the chairman of AMEC, on this panel as well. So are there any thoughts or questions from the audience? And just while you're thinking, I was going to ask Alex and Paloma, as the clients in the audience, I'm intrigued as to whether PR or communications is as good as or is better than advertising when it comes to measurement and evaluation. Is PR still behind advertising, paid media?
Well, Danny, I mean, I pay great tribute to PR Week, which has done some wonderful work over the years, particularly under your leadership. But actually, I'm head of UK government communication. And as UK government communication, it's not communications, which is a telephony system. So I see the thing as an integrated whole, and we use PR as appropriate, and we use marketing. I would say, in response to the technical challenge, I didn't quite agree with John about technology being the thing. That's why I stuck the picture of your brains up on the screen, because yes, we have tons of data. I am responsible, I am told, for 9 billion digital media impressions each year. and I've got dashboards and the government trading desk and the mapping tool and so on. What I need is intelligent insight from my teams and from the marvellous monitoring companies we use. I was very impressed with the company out there I saw, Tag Fact, who told me that they employ 300 people actually to analyse stuff. Who knew you didn't just have to reduce it all to machines?
Should I just go write a reply there with Alex, if I may? And that's what's the good thing about a panel, right? You've got different views. But so my position on the technology piece relates to the earlier slide where the analyst is going to have to find their role. The human is going to have to find their role. So my view is that the technology is going to take more of that decision making, but then the analyst will have to bring the intelligence to it, or that final piece of intelligence, but their role's going to adapt. So that's how I see it.
Yeah, but I didn't agree with your media analysis either. I mean, we will do media analysis, and it's important because it's one of the building blocks. But anyway.
So can I challenge also a little bit?
Yeah.
Can I challenge to join my companions? I would say that perhaps PR has to learn a little bit from advertising. And I think that sometimes advertising, you have a clear return of investment, you have a clear return on brand building. While on PR, I really like your I'm going to be the other side. I really like your expression on return on engagement. And that's what we are missing. The moment we prove how PR and many others disciplines will help us on the return on engagement and not to measure everything by the dollar or by the media coverage and others, that's when PR is going to jump. But at the moment, I think we are still exploring how best to move from input to outcome. We are still trying to prove how this has a real impact on your business, on my mandate. That's I think that still we are not playing in the same grounds as for advertising. Advertising, you place your ad, you place your whatever, and you know what are your clear objectives. On this, it is much more nuanced, and I think that this is perhaps why still the investment on PR is never reaching the same levels as the investment on advertising.
Yeah, very, very possibly. Any questions or thoughts from the audience? Gentleman over there. If you'd like to say
Hi. Afternoon. Thank you, everybody. It's John Meakin from Grayling Communications. Question for Paloma, actually. I was very interested in what you were saying about how everything you do now has a purpose and has to answer the question, why are we doing this? And I wondered if that had resulted in UNICEF doing less, but doing it better, doing fewer things, but doing them better.
Absolutely. I think that's... I'm going to talk about perhaps more from the communication and advocacy side, but exactly that. When we went to our program people, and in our case, we are not a communication organization, an advocacy organization, we are a program organization. So the main question to them was, where do you need us to deliver results? So we went to, for instance, to give you an example, we went to our protection people, and we said, where do you need us on your targets on violence against children? That is, by the way, is one of those things that are increasing, not decreasing. And then what can we do for you? And they were the ones saying, don't do headlines, do campaigns that change the attitudes of males. Because at the end, usually in domestic violence and sexual violence, 90% of perpetrators are males. So how can you help us to change the attitudes, to create public outcry, outroar about an issue that in many Asian and African countries, especially if they are very traditional countries, it is hidden. Nobody wants to talk about that. Create the engagement, create the uproar, engage young people about the issue, then we can go and work with governments, work with legislation. So that what for us was important, because then also we could convince donors, like the British government and others, that it was impossible for us to deliver on our programmatic objectives on protection without investing in public campaigning, who were going to be addressing targeted populations. And there are things that we can track, because now we do opinion barometers, opinion polls. Also, we have to convince our donors these things take a lot of time. You don't change attitudes in 3 months. You need to invest, you need to keep going. And another thing, for instance, for us was very important, was to go and do the campaigns with religious leaders, with interfaith leaders, to say, listen, speak out, speak with us. We did a fantastic campaign with Al-Azhar University in Cairo against FGM, for instance. I think that for us has been the way to be very concrete. Another one for us, of course, is migration and refugees. The same. We are against the odds. We are a minority. 70% and growing of the European population said we had enough. How we prove that a child is a child, and a kid in the Aquarius boat is as much as a child as your kid here. Are we going to drop them and see them die, or are we going to do something about it? On that, I think that is when our people say, yeah, the kids will come now to Spain, and I'm very proud this time of the answer of Spain, but these kids will have to be accompanied not only the first week they arrive, for many years to come. We have to be accompanying the public opinion to engage with that, and not just to be seeing that as a headline today on the newspaper. So I would say that the what for also is a discipline for my team. Every time they propose something, what for, what for, what for? And I think we all should be engaging much more on that sort of questions.
Alex, you were going to...
Yeah, Paloma's absolutely right, but it's worth emphasising the point. It's a good question. There's a right and correct focus on charities and government organisations spending the maximum on the front line. But unless you do the research work to understand what works in terms of public intervention, you'll spend a lot of money possibly on less effective things. And the examples, for instance, to get kids to learn in schools in Africa, they were given lots of textbooks, but they were less effective as an intervention than giving them inoculation against ringworm, because they were healthier and more up for it. But you wouldn't know that unless you did the randomised controlled trials, which help people understand. That costs money on the back office.
And Abe, you were nodding vigorously there. Can your data help on those type of metrics?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the conversation point here is, first of all, choose your metric. Like, what is your measurement? You know, for somebody like Paloma, it's very different from the measurement from an eBay or an Adobe. So I think once you understand what you're measuring, there's plenty of data to help drive that outcome and understand what it is. So, you know, Alex, you said the information's out there. The data is there in droves. You know, it's our obligation, one, to cull that information. Number two, the artificial intelligence allows us to sequence it better and then deliver it to people that can interpret that and use it to help guide business outcomes. So, yes, the nod is real.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, here.
Sorry, there's a gentleman there, then afterwards we can go to a gentleman over the back there.
Hello, my name is Alexander de Ruiter from OB1 in the Netherlands. And actually, I believe in data. We collect data. We've been collecting data for a long time. But one item that I'm missing today is the GDPR. And how is that, and actually I'm just going to ask the panel, how is that going to impact the, the next steps that we can take and what we can do with the data? And just looking for an answer.
Who would like to handle the GDPR question? Alex.
Yeah, I mean, it's hugely important to us. We're a public authority. We've got to be GDPR compliant. I think it's absolutely necessary and timely information. And aren't we all glad that we're getting fewer crap emails? Isn't that a good thing? Spam emails. Now, so we have a program to implement it. It is interesting. So all the marketing campaigns we do, we've had to work very carefully with our media buyers to make sure that we are GDPR compliant. But there was a question earlier on to Carmen from a colleague, I think, from Indonesia, who asked about micro-targeting. We do quite a lot of micro-targeting. That's the reason we have the heat map. But you can be GDPR compliant even with large-scale marketing campaigns as long as you've sought the permissions. And we all know when we go onto websites and press, yes, I accept the cookies, etc., we're giving up a lot of data. So the law is necessary, but being compliant is the way through it.
Thank you very much. There was a question over there.
Chris Shaw from Cometric. I was heartened to see reference this morning to Larry Fink's letter, really asking companies to subscribe to a social purpose. It seems to me this is a bit of a watershed, because we're seeing now the license to operate of the major brand titans, the tech companies, under duress. So in terms of engaging and providing some metrics over the next 10 years on that specific entity, I mean, Abe, you said choose your metric. What advice would the panel have to companies choosing their metric to measure what social purpose they have across the remit? And could you give advice also how to ensure that you deliver that and the insights around that to the C-suite? Because we are extremely bad still at synthesizing our data into insights so that the C-suite can really understand what's going on.
Who would like to handle that one?
I'll take a stab.
Go on, Abe.
First of all, your question, I actually think the answers come from the C-suite, right? So It's our job as any professional, name your part of the organization, to interpret what the CEO or the CFO cares about. And those are very discernible, very clear, typically, defined components, right? And earlier, the discussion with Axis, those were clear objectives for the financial services company to say what they cared about. And frankly, if every part of the company isn't tying themselves back to those, I don't know what they're tying themselves to. So, I think it starts with, number one, understanding what the CEO, CFO, CMO cares about, what is defining the company go-to-market. And then in turn, your obligation is to take a stance and say, look, I sit at the table like anybody else, and I deliver more value, but I do it in a way that speaks to what you define. And the truth is, most of the data is available, right? So the data is available, the analysts are available, the technology is available. Then for you to put that into a way that it can be consumed and then measured for repeatable process.
And David, I think you had a view on this.
Yeah, I mean, to maybe answer your question in a very myopic way, I mean, in terms of a specific technique, I mean, in some respects, it goes to, if you think about communications planning, it begins with, okay, what are we trying to do to drive the organization? What are our communications goals? And then how do we communicate? But part of that is to fulfill that, to understand that attribution and those linkages is, I would say, something that's still fairly nascent in our field. It happens, we use it, but the use of predictive analytics to be able to say the probability of purchase or to go to work for or to do business with this company changes like this if the company has as a strong part of its culture a sense of purpose, a direction. It's a purpose-driven organization. You can create those linkages through opinion surveys, actually through media coverage as it relates to sales volume, but it is, applying the field of predictive analytics or econometrics, which I would argue is still something a lot of us are doing, but it hasn't really taken full hold.
Yeah, and to that point, David, too, I do think there is a desire to marry both paid, own, and earn, right?
Yep.
So, the truth is, in this category, there's not one channel that is the one main thing that is the defining thing that triggers the outcome, right? So if we can pair that together, and I think oftentimes the earned media data is the missed part. So if we can bring that together in a unified view, that's powerful.
Richard, did you want to add something?
Well, just that social purpose is beyond communications. I mean, if there's an example of an area where you need to integrate data way beyond communications, that's it. And that's what balanced scorecards exist in businesses. An organization's product, behavior, ethics, all that needs to be taken into account. And so we should be looking to integrate data at a far bigger level than just paid, earned, shared, and owned.
John.
Yeah, I think to Chris's question, it is coming straight from the C-suite, and it involves many different parts of the organization. So investor relations is heavily involved in it, human resources very much involved in it, and it is where the panel's been talking about. It brings many data sets. So your employee surveys will be there, your NPS scores will be there, your media coverage will be there, your social engagement scores. And BlackRock, we're a public company, we've got the same letter. They're very, very keen on it. It will be questioned in every analyst meeting that you have with BlackRock, and they believe it builds both a better society, but a better company and better financial results. So that's how they want to see the linkages. And I think it's a really good, there is opportunity in this space for us to play because it brings many parts of what the communication strategy is for many different audiences. So I think it's a strong point of where we can play.
Paloma, you had a...
No, I just wanted to I think that Larry's letter was really an earthquake. I think Joe said it was an earthquake because it moved the social commitment from a corporate social responsibility function to a CEO function and to a business head function. And also that, I think it has a lot to do with us on communications because before was a bit of a, not tokenistic, but perhaps very, very partial, not very, I would say even authentic sometimes communications. Now, once the businesses have been assuming that and once the CEOs have incorporated that, not only in their speeches, but in their brand building and others, that becomes a totally different game. And as, I mean, I live in New York, but no doubt at the moment the young people leaving college are going to demand to go to a place that they really believe on the CEO and the CEO commitment on the purpose. And I think that that's going to come to Europe very, very soon.
Okay, thank you, Paloma. Barry, do we have time for one more question? Yes, is there any other points? Anyone on this side of the room? Biased towards that side of the room? Okay, gentleman over there.
Thank you. I'm Daniel Stauber from Facebook. I'm asking you about, I really commend the initiative to go towards business outcomes, and Avi, you have had in your presentation an acknowledgement towards attribution conversations that need to be had at some point in time. So I'm trying to understand, looking around the room where there are largely people responsible for earned media analysis, what efforts people on the panel or AMEC are making to link better with more traditional advertising or other media analysis firms such as Nielsen or so forth.
Who would like to take that one?
Well, I mean, I guess you've asked about AMEC, so I will. I mean, it's critical, and as we look to our future plan, one of the key things we're doing is moving membership beyond people focused on, what John described as media content analysis, to organizations that fit into all stages of the framework effectively. So that includes all the market research companies, the survey companies, organizations like Facebook, frankly, so that we can bring those skills into our organization and really help this industry to understand what an integrated measurement program looks like. So that makes it critical.
David.
Something I didn't actually mention in the coverage of the survey results, but that came up a whole bunch of times as people talked about the crystal ball in the future, was that there is a potential future which is called public relations doesn't exist in 10 years from now. And that basically it's all about integrated marketing. And I think when we get to that point, a real almost challenge to AMEC's future is if this is really more a PR-focused organization, but 10 years from now, PR just doesn't exist anymore, and companies like Ketchum and Weber and Fleischmann and Edelman, we all either go out of business or change, then this organization changes dramatically
so
in the
I mean,
future.
that's right. And under your leadership and previous chairs' leaderships, we've begun that journey. So if you remember what we used to be, we were founded as the Association for Media Evaluation Companies. That's what AMEC stood for. And we changed our name on purpose to reflect the new realities, and that work's going to continue. We have to change. We have to embrace and extend our membership into these wider areas. It's critical. It's absolutely on our radar. In our board meeting yesterday, one of the top agenda items.
I would say we're bringing lots of different data sets in, but do we have a methodology that sticks it all together yet? Is that still in its infancy? I think from a client's point of view, they're trying to asking us to work with different organizations to make an accurate assessment on where the most influential pieces of communication is occurring. And I'd say we're in that infancy of trying to bring all the different media types together and give them an accurate picture. But so data coming together, methodology, still some ways to go.
Can I just add a point? It came up earlier about advertising and what can we learn from them. There's lots that we can learn from the advertising industry, but I think we shouldn't have an inferiority complex. If you go out and talk to the research companies that measure the effectiveness of advertising, yes, they have methodologies and they have approaches, but none of them agree with each other, and all of them acknowledge that they haven't got it cracked. So we shouldn't think that that somehow this other industry knows exactly what it's doing and we don't. I also don't think there is a simple solution to measuring the effectiveness of communication. There isn't a number. We're not going to replace AVE with a number. I believe we have come to the end of the journey. I think one of your points, David, I think we are at the end of the journey. We have a clear step-by-step process. The AMEC framework, Alex has launched the Cabinet Office's or GCS's Framework 2.0. It's a great resource. Do read the literature that surrounds it. It's a process that shows how to measure communications. It's not a single number, it's a process. I believe the answer's there. The problem is it's slightly hard work, but that's where the leaders in this room need to step up to the plate and educate the market that that's the answer. We are there. We are at the end of the journey.
And the final word to Mr. Aitken.
Thank you, Danny. I agree with what the panel have said, but I'm slightly worried that we're still having this conversation about silos. I mean, I was thinking about the biggest thing that I've dealt with this year is the response to the Salisbury poisoning, the Russian state attack on a couple of people in Salisbury. And that's a campaign that's run from a cathedral city in southern England right up to the United Nations. And at every stage of that campaign and informing the decisions we have taken has been communications evaluation. They don't make the decisions, but nevertheless, the polling that helps understand the government, help the government understand how its policies are going down. The rapid response unit that draws information from Facebook and online more generally about what is happening in the world. The media monitoring, where we can identify that the Russian state has used 32 different narratives against us. So in the real world, if you're faced with a business problem, and that's quite a meaty business problem, how do you deter an aggressive and hostile state? As the C-suite, you just need to know where the reliable data is coming from it. I don't care whether it's coming from PR or marketing. I just need reliable data.
It all comes back to Russia, it seems. But I'm aware that we are bang on time, so I'd just like to thank our brilliant panel for a fascinating conversation. Thank you.